Zero trust is operating under the assumption of breach rather than under the assumption of trust.
It's also about identity and access management. It's cloud security, and it's encryption.
We monitor other teams' internal security compliance. Every single request and user is authenticated and verified to ensure that all communications are secure.
One of the fundamental tenets of zero trust is the threat visibility. We see more than 620 petabytes of traffic crossing our network, 1/5 of all internet traffic. We know where all the bad neighborhoods are, and we use this threat intelligence to then do some dynamic security orchestration.
Implementing zero trust also requires that you understand your network, what all applications you have, who your users are, where they're using from, what devices need to be accessing your resources.
So one of the ways we are trying to work in zero trust, especially as we are deploying the next carrier-grade routers out there, is using a tool called Agentless to go pull the software bill of materials from some of the carrier-grade routers that we are deploying.
Zero trust is more important now than before because now we have many more workers working in a hybrid fashion. We also have a lot more resources uploaded to the public cloud as opposed to on-prem services.
So we basically play in all these verticals to have a very cohesive zero trust strategy.
Please welcome Ron Dilley and Johannes Jaskolski.
They were great. So they did a great job. Great. So hello, thank you very much for listening here and enjoying our topic of zero trust. I wanted to apologize for my West Coast cybersecurity chic. I didn't get the memo about the jackets. Sorry. So this whole conversation started a month or two ago when we sat down with some friends and had a discussion about zero trust. It took about 2 hours. It was more an argument than a conversation. And in those 2 hours, we basically agreed that we didn't agree on what zero trust was. So after 2 more 2-hour discussions, we figured we'd spend 30 minutes talking about zero trust and get it all done in one fell swoop. So, which really leads to the first issue with zero trust, which is you have to know what zero trust is for you. You have to have a definition, and it has to be very specific to your organization. And there are so many different definitions of zero trust. For example, Johannes, what does zero trust mean to you?
Yeah, for me, first of all, I hate the name. Zero trust is kind of the wrong kind of war chant. It's like fail fast. You really want people chanting fail fast? No, succeed fast, right? So it states the problem. What it really means is don't trust anything without proof, right? Establish proof. Don't trust anything without proof. It's actually really hard, but that's really how I think you should look at it. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree and disagree. So zero trust is a title, is a name. It's super confusing to me. To everyone I talk to, so what is zero trust? What's the goal? To not trust. Well, no, that's not the goal. The goal is to provide assurance of trust. Mm-hmm. And that's actually really hard to do, assurance of trust. So how do you get from gratuitous trust everybody, to practical trust, to, if you're lucky, reasonable trust? And I talked to some lawyers a while ago about what reasonable is, and their definition is put 100 security practitioners that are experts in a room, and whatever those 51 say is reasonable, that's reasonable. So reasonable trust. And then, of course, nirvana, which is zero trust.
Maximum trust.
Maximum trust. We're still working on a definition for zero trust, and that's one of the problems. But there's got to be other challenges associated with zero trust. It can't just be the definition.
For sure, for sure. My view is how they say, know thy enemy, and that's really important in cyber, obviously.
Is that a Sun Tzu reference? Because all the best talks have a Sun Tzu reference.
They must.
So this is a great talk because we had
checked the box.
So nice job.
Check. All right, good. So know thy enemy, but in this case, more importantly, know thyself. I think the first challenge in zero trust is having a really good inventory. If you don't have a good inventory, then it really doesn't matter, right? If you don't know what you have, if you don't know your users, if you don't know all your assets, where they are, and it turns out that's getting harder and harder. It was in the intro video, right? Now your applications are sitting still inside the perimeter, probably in a private cloud, at least for us. And then also you have an abundance of SaaS service, and that portfolio is probably growing for you. You're probably buying more SaaS services, right? And so inventory is not easy. And even once you establish it, you have to understand what that inventory means, and you have to maintain it, right?
That's a critical component of Zero Trust, is this idea of feedback loops. And I would argue if you're going to do Zero Trust, the biggest win you can have is in everything that we do. Every architecture discussion, engineering discussion, implementation, operations discussion, people on your teams are asking questions about how are we verifying that what's supposed to happen happens. And that verification shouldn't be based on the system you use. It should be a separate system that does the verification. And inventory, right?
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many times I've talked about having an inventory, and it turns out, shockingly, that the inventory is wrong. Exactly. With great software, and the inventory is wrong. With Zero Trust, having that feedback mechanism, some other control that helps verify, provide trust for your inventory.
That's right.
But it's more than just the inventory. It's got to be.
It is. So let's say you get a perfect inventory and you do a good job maintaining it. Embarking on that journey is kind of like boiling the ocean. So you're going to have to prioritize. That's also hard because your cybersecurity view of the business might not align with the real business priorities. So you have to kind of understand what this is all about, and you have to understand a lot of metadata around the inventory, like what kind of data are we talking about? What kind of processes? Are these business critical processes? What would happen if those processes would be disrupted, right? So another really big component is even if you have the inventory, you have to prioritize. Don't try to do everything all at once. It won't work, and also most likely your bosses won't pay for it. So prioritize.
Yeah, I did a discussion with some CISOs last month, and literally for 20 minutes, the CISOs fretted over and over and over again. How can I do this? It's impossible. It's boiling the ocean. There's not enough resources. There's not enough time. My environment is too complicated. I can't get it done. And it's prioritization. And trick, prioritize, and then find out the common dependencies. All your systems rely on the network. The network is a common dependency. Most of your systems, hopefully, rely on authentication. Common dependency. And then you can target those dependencies for Zero Trust efforts. Prioritization.
That's right.
That's good. So it's inventory, prioritization.
Sun Tzu.
Just two?
Yeah, all of them.
Oh, we got Sun Tzu as well. Yeah,
Yeah.
and we explained this. So what else? Is there anything else?
No, I think now.
Oh, we're done?
Opportunities.
Opportunities. What are the opportunities?
Well, I think the first one, and this is because I actually like doing this stuff, is you have to embrace the journey. So like designing access, designing Zero Trust for your business is not a chore or a burden. It's actually pretty awesome. It's a lot of fun. And so don't shout edicts from your ivory tower, but instead join your business on the ground, right? And be with them along the way, face brutal operational realities, because some of the controls you think up and your team thinks up and you guys all sitting there and your cyber team saying, this is super duper. When it hits the ground, it might not play out that way. That's okay. Take another shot at it. Don't freak out. Don't ignore it. Please don't ignore it. Embrace it. And again, become part of the team, right? Don't be a judge and jury CSO team, but be a team that is part of the business. And if you do this Zero Trust journey right, you will actually learn a lot about the company you work for, a lot more than you probably know right now. And they will also, the other stakeholders will embrace you and say, oh, okay, they're part of the team. They're not there to scold us. They're there to enable us, right? Like, that is the game. But that's actually incredible fun. Like, as we embarked at AT&T, you learn, every day you learn something new. You engage a new part of the business. You're like, oh, that's how that really works. That's so cool, right?
Yeah, and did I mention that feedback loop thing? A great litmus test for your progress is, are your teams talking about controls, mechanisms to verify that whatever you deploy, if you're deploying an agent, that verifies that the agents are actually up and running. Because there's plenty of software that runs agents, and you go into the pane of glass and say, how's everything going? It's like, it's going great. All the agents are working perfectly. An independent assessment, yeah, 50% of your agents are working. The rest are, not really happy today. So having those feedback loops, and imagine 6 months or 12 months of teams having those discussions.
That's right.
In architecture, in engineering, in implementation, in ops, in integration. And the changes you're going to have in your security control efficacy. Because we've all had issues after a breach or when something bad has happened and you're doing your postmortem, and it turns out that that control you thought you had, that you paid a lot of money for, wasn't actually working the way you expected it to. The backup restore thing didn't work right. The agents didn't work right. The software didn't work right. The firewall rules didn't work right. And this concept in Zero Trust of feedback loops is one of the great empowering components.
That's right.
So it's important. Now for me, opportunity-wise, I'm thinking like bigger picture. I agree with you, all of those opportunities you integrated. Yeah. But for me, it's in a world where generative AI makes the Nigerian print scams hard to detect.
Yeah.
And all of the other video, audio, social engineering mechanisms and tools that our adversaries use really, really, really land.
Yeah.
And they land on workstations inside your perimeter where you have users logged in that you granted permission to your most critical systems, having functions like Zero Trust capabilities to reduce the attack surfaces you have, to increase the probability of detecting or blocking or preventing horizontal movement. It's not just a benefit. I would argue in this day and age, it's mandatory.
I agree. And as part of that, really, I know there is an avalanche of vendors that are all embracing right now the Gen AI and all the AI capabilities, machine learning, which is all good. So definitely make that part of your strategy. But I can't stress this enough. Get the basics right. Don't build your house on quicksand. Get your basic access management strategy right, your basic authentication right. Authenticate your users, authenticate the devices for workforce, maybe rethink some of the bring your own device strategies of the past, and instead make sure you have a trusted environment, right? And also evaluate the network part. That's really, really important. Where is this access coming from? Ideally, if you have the basics right, if you have a rep in a call center, for example, you know it's that person logging in on a machine that has been assigned to that person and coming from that actual call center. If you can verify those three things, you're getting the basics right. And by getting the basics right, you also really improve the signal-to-noise ratio. So then if you're employing very advanced capabilities and deep analysis, guess what? If you're letting that kind of compute loose on an avalanche of data, it's going to cost you a fortune to evaluate all this stuff. So if you can tighten your basics and really get that right, then the signal-to-noise ratio improves, and then your analysis becomes more effective. I mean, what do you think about that?
Well, I'm a strong proponent of signal-to-noise ratio. I would argue that it's probably the single most challenging thing we as InfoSec practitioners fight with every single day. And everything that we implement and everything we buy usually makes the signal-to-noise ratios worse. So every opportunity we have to improve the signal-to-noise ratio, especially in an environment, a Zero Trust environment, where you can typify normal, then there's a possibility not to discard normal, but to move normal aside and focus on the abnormal. And that makes it way easier to find the adversary.
I totally.
So signal-to-noise ratio, that's good.
That's absolutely essential.
With feedback loops. Don't forget the feedback loops. Really, really important.
I agree.
So that can't be the only opportunity.
No, I think another really big one is that right now, again, users distributed, applications are distributed, but the tools to contain all of that are fragmented, right? You guys have like one tool that does this all for you? I don't think so, right? There's a whole bunch of fragmented tools. And there's a lot of risk that we need to contain until we really integrate these tools and integrate the views that these tools have. And a perfect example is you could have something where a bad guy compromises one step, right, and passes the siloed controls here, becomes somebody completely different, passes the next set of controls here, becomes somebody totally different, and passes the next set of controls here. That's a problem. If those three controls were integrated, you would have caught him in the second step. It's like, well, this is a totally different user. That cannot be, right? So integration is really important. And as part of that also, I think, again, using the network piece of that, and that's probably not weird, me saying this from AT&T, but that is really important. I think if your strategy is kind of giving up and saying, yeah, okay, the entire internet can come at me, it's probably not the right decision, right? You most likely already have some type of bot defense capabilities that can filter some of the noise out. And we at AT&T are working on solutions like AT&T Dynamic Defense, where we can even clean the pipes further. But you have to, again, it's the signal to noise ratio, right?
Critical.
You have to get the basics right, as I said. You have to integrate your controls. Don't rely on a whole bunch of siloed controls, because you will not have the right kind of visibility and you will not understand what's going on. And then, again, also understand how, like, a good design of the network security is part of zero trust design. You don't have a zero trust design if you don't understand the network part of this.
Yeah, so as part of this prep for discussions, we did the definition of zero trust. And I'm not going to say who said it, but in one of those discussions, I'm talking about, well, this is what zero trust is. And I have like the mound of papers, and right, I'm like hand on it, good security engineer, oh yeah, this is what zero trust is. And the response I got was, well, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense. The network stuff, that's hard. We can't do that. That's not what zero trust is. And I'm like, no, really, it is what zero trust is. And the conversation spun for 15 minutes but the network is hard, and controlling the network is hard, and software-defined control is hard. And we can't do that. We need to focus on zero trust stuff that isn't the network. And I think my greatest win for that was about 2 weeks later, the person came back and said, actually, I'm starting to warm to the idea of having network as part of zero trust. So.
It wasn't me.
It wasn't me. But that network and control of the network and reduction of the attack surface through control and those feedback loops, those verification loops, is critical to the efficacy of zero trust. It just is.
That's right. And there are a lot of pretty good vendor stories, but again, and they're really good products, and there's a lot of evolution. I think there'll be more vendor consolidations as well.
Yeah.
But you don't have time to wait for all of that. So right now, you really do need to look at whatever you have and whatever you may be acquiring in the next year, and figure out not just how to launch those things, but how to integrate them, right? How to really maximize the value and how to not end up with siloed controls. Because the bad guys figure out how to dodge and weave and bob through that stuff. They do. And so you have to integrate your controls.
Yeah, it really is a progression past defense in depth. It's defenses that are thoughtfully implemented, prioritized based on an inventory, and those defenses basically act as interlocking controls to verify this control, make sure this control is effective and is proved trusted, which proves this is secure and trusted, et cetera. And it's so much more effective, more powerful than rings, right? Curtain walls and keeps, that's not what zero trust is. Or what are we going to call it now? Is it zero trust? Is it gratuitous trust? Is it practical trust? Is
maximum
it reasonable
trust?
trusts?
I like maximum trust.
Maximum trust?
Maximum trust. I like it. Doesn't it sound like you can get behind it? Maximum trust.
Like practical trust.
That sounds boring.
It's boring, but
practical. Who wants to be practical?
I'm not a marketing person. I'm a curmudgeon in training. So practical trust. Get an inventory.
West Coast, East Coast.
West Coast. That's it.
Yeah. Okay. I like maximum trust, but there's some really interesting kind of next thing, and you probably have some solutions that already play in that space. But as part of the integrating your tools and getting the basics right, I think we'll see even more evolution around behavioral. And what I mean by that is, when you say zero trust, okay, we're talking about users, like authentication, what device are they coming from, where they're coming from on the network, right? Are they accessing the things that they're supposed to access?
Where they came from yesterday.
Check, yeah.
Half an hour.
But now, within access that they're authorized for, this little thing called insider threat, right? Because again, if you lock all the doors better and the bad guys can't hack their way in, they're going to bring money and come after your insiders. That is going to happen if it's not already happening. So the more you actually implement and deliver these awesome technical controls, the more they're going to be inspired to bribe your people. That's going to happen. So on the behavioral side, which we also think is part of zero trust,
Yeah, absolutely.
is don't trust the behavior. It's part of zero trust. So understand what normal looks like. And if a legitimate user is doing a whole bunch of things that look weird, do something about it, right? So that's actually very interesting. And originally, I didn't think of that being part of zero trust. That was more hardcore, like the devices, the network, proxies in the middle. We got this. But the behavioral part, I think, we shouldn't start thinking about it when the bad guys make the pivot. We should anticipate and lean into that now.
Yeah.
So you should also think about that. Like, how are you using behavioral analysis? And that's where actually Gen AI, ML, all those things come in and be very helpful, right? To figure out baseline normal behavior, and then understand deviations from that normal, right? That can be hard because, like, on the day that we launch the next iPhone, that can look like an anomaly through the wrong lens, right? So you also, again, back to the other point, partner with your business, understand your business, understand the ebb and flow that comes with your business, so you're not tagging something that is completely legitimate. That's hard. Like, I'm not going to say that's easy. But I do think we also have to embrace the behavioral piece of this, because without that, you're closing some doors, but you already know what's going to happen next, right?
I'm so glad that you're coming around to that. It's great.
He did start that. He gets credit.
Yeah, it's not about credit though. But thank you. So
It's not, right?
it's not exactly. So one of the most dangerous things we do as security practitioners is what we have to do business. We have to grant access to users so they can do business. And the act of granting the access creates a tremendous risk for us. And having this capability to reduce the attack surface, to verify that the controls are working properly, and I'm just saying what you said and agreeing, to have this idea of what normal looks like, what normal workflow looks like. And it's tough. Security people generally don't understand what business workflow looks like. We're security people, we understand what bad actors look like. But we don't understand this is a normal thing that a user does to do their job. This is what a finance person does. This is what an HR person does. We don't know. So having tooling, having mechanisms that can characterize normal and throw alarms when it's abnormal in the user interaction, in the workflows, critical, especially as our adversaries get better and better and better at landing malicious code on our workstations, tricking our users into clicking on things and getting malcode onto those boxes.
It's the workflows. It's also the operational realities, right? Like the simplest security example is like, super complicated passwords posted on the screen with super complicated password, right? Like everybody remembers that. So like
I always liked putting my passwords underneath my keyboard.
It's very convenient.
It was the first two-factor authentication implementation that I ever had. It forced a cyber attack and a kinetic attack to gain access to my environment. No?
I cannot agree with that.
Oh, okay, all right. Well, that's the story I told. So
it's a good story.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But like, similar to that, I mean, again, if you have these workflows, you got to go visit and actually see. I stressed that before, I'll stress it again. Partner with the business, be with them on the ground. Don't be in your ivory tower and thinking this is how it is. Don't create or try to run a abstract, one-size-fits-all, zero-trust playbook. No, the real thing is hard. The real thing is that you have to understand what you're trying to actually implement and then customize that for your business, right? AT&T, not every business has stores. Not every business has call center operations. Not every business have installers that, even in bad weather, come and actually connect the internet for you. You know, those are all different scenarios, and they all bring different risk vectors. So you're going to have to do the hard work and actually grind through it. But to your point again, like understand the flows, but also understand how they actually play out in reality.
That's good.
Right? There's a lot of really good documentation and like spreadsheets detailing all these things. But is that actually what's happening? I love when I actually go into an AT&T store and just ask them, hey, so how's it going? How do you actually do this? How do you log in? What's the experience, right?
Yeah.
Like that feedback is incredible.
Priceless, yeah.
Because you think in your head you got it all solved and you're awesome, but then you go in there and they're like, oh, it's actually slow these days and this and that. And so you just work through it, right? You want to actually achieve the outcome, not theoretically achieve the outcome. That's really, really important.
So we have time, so I'm going to give you credit. Johannes asked a couple weeks ago, so Ron, what about quantum and zero trust? What kind of impact is that going to have? And I had to noodle on that one a little bit, and so this is what I got. Let's see if it works for you.
All right.
I think the fundamental challenge with quantum and zero trust is as soon as large integer crypto fails, any compartmentalization mechanism you have, any part of your zero trust architecture that relies on encryption to provide protection or isolation falls. So you need to think about that. What is the impact and the implication, and what's the timeline for shifting to crypto systems that will be resilient in the face of quantum attacks?
I think that's right. And there's also some interesting angles, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, like steal now, decrypt later. So it does change also the approach you take. So when you're designing zero trust, you can't say, well, okay, they got to the database, but the data was encrypted. Okay.
Well, you can say that.
If the cycle time of the data, if it's not valuable 5 years from now, okay. But if you're a pharmaceutical company and this is really, really important research that took 5 decades, you're probably not going to be okay, because in 5 years, once they've stolen it, they'll actually be able to decrypt it, right? So steal now, decrypt later. Those are all things you should consider. But you know, not one size fits all. If you don't have those risks, then maybe that's not a big deal for you. But other companies probably do have that risk and need to actually contend with that and factor that in. But yeah, I think quantum, especially how it applies to encryption, is going to be important. Yeah. I think the other thing it's going to do is we are already seeing the time to really weaponize an attack once a 0 day is uncovered is like nothing now. With Gen AI, you can create an attack in no time. I worry a little bit what happens when that's actually then superpowered by quantum computing, right? Like that. Yeah. That's going to be mind-boggling.
It's more work.
Fast. Yeah. So your jobs will be safe. Maybe that's what we end on. Like your jobs will be safe. We will need cyber professionals, more of them. But those are the challenges, right?
Yeah, I think that's it. So we have about a minute left. Let's recap, because I hear that you're supposed to recap what you said after you said it. So the things that are hard, defining what zero trust means for you and your organization. What else? Inventory. Feedback loops. In every component, feedback loops. What else? Prioritize. And when you do that prioritization, consider dependencies that are common. And work on that stuff first. Authentication, the network, et cetera.
That's right.
What else?
Embrace the journey. Enjoy it. It's actually fun. And be there with your business partners. Right? Yeah. Like, don't be the other team, be part of the team.
Yeah. And let's be clear, the fun part is the idea that you're frustrating the adversary. That's the fun part.
That's exactly it.
And it's worth it. I would argue that we have to do it. It's mandatory, but it's worth it. The time is well spent, and you will benefit, your organizations will benefit, and your customers and clients will benefit from it.
Get the basics right.
The basics, yeah.
Which includes integrating your controls. Don't rely on a whole bunch of siloed controls. Yep. Integrate them.
Yeah, and always dress West Coast cyber chic.
Well, actually, most importantly, again, I mentioned like you have to have a network security strategy. So then look at like who are really, really good vendors in that space and might be able to provide much more secure network solutions for you.
I completely
I
agree.
have an idea, and it might be.
I don't think we can recommend vendors though.
No, it's all good. It's definitely AT&T. So go talk to Rita Sentinel.
Yeah, good to go.
They're happy to talk to you. Sign up today.
Yeah. That's it. That's all we got.